So in today's training, I wanted to talk about just the idea of where does federal dollars come from, right? I think that small businesses often think there's only one path to federal revenue. It's that path of prime contracting, but there's actually multiple paths, right? And we're going to talk about this. But unfortunately, I think the biggest contributor to small businesses thinking we go down this prime contracting path is the government itself. A lot of the material they put out, a lot of the advice they give when you talk to them, they're talking about how do you move in and get a prime contract. But really, there's other ways to move forward on there. These other two paths in addition to just getting a prime contract. And so that's what I want to talk about today. So we're going to talk about the three paths to federal revenue success. As we go forward, one of the things that I like to just really demystify is this idea of money. You might have heard of people talking about the federal market or, get into the government contracting. There's trillions of dollars. Yes, they spend trillions of dollars in the federal government, but that's not the contract dollars. That's not what we think when we say the government spends a lot of money. What they really spend is closer to $700 billion. And those $700 billion can also be known as small business eligible dollars, right? We potentially can win contracts that are in that space. That $700 billion is what the government sets goals on, 5%, 23%, et cetera, against that $700 billion. They're trying to let the small businesses get a piece of that. By the way, if you don't know this, the GovCon Chamber, our organization, our mission and vision is to get 50% of those federal dollars for small businesses, and not by going to Congress or anybody and getting them to change the laws. I want us to go take it, right? We just go out there and demonstrate that we're the experts who can serve the government's mission. They'll give us the contracts, right? You got to earn it, but we can earn 50%. I'm not sticking with the 23% or 25% that they talk about. The other thing I really want to talk about, especially as it relates to these three paths, is I don't want you making the same mistakes that many small businesses who've come before you, where we waste a year, 2, 3, 4 years. Some 8A companies are in for business, get their 8A certification, then they waste the first couple of years trying to learn how to sell, et cetera. And there's so many lessons learned that we small businesses have that if you pay attention to us, you can accelerate past our mistakes. And so you're going to make your own mistakes, but you're not going to make the same ones we did. And one of those is chasing the wrong path to the revenue that you want to get. There's stages of growth within the federal market in really any business. And that's what I'm going to be driving down on. But if you follow a process, if you follow the three paths that I'm going to talk about today, then making money in the federal market is absolutely possible, right? If you're a good person and you're a professional and you can deliver on whatever work you're doing, then the rest is just a process. The rest is just learning what to do and in what order to do them. And we'll drive down on that. The last thing I want to talk about is I'm going to talk about these three paths. The thing to keep in mind is the billion-dollar companies, these large prime contractors, they're on all three paths that I'm going to talk about, right? So they're on it, and there's no reason we shouldn't be. The only difference is they can be on all three paths immediately, right? They're a billion-dollar firm. You might be just getting started out, and one path is the best path for you until you begin to mature your organization to be able to get on the other paths. And so we'll talk a lot more about that. If you don't know who I am, my name is Neil McDonald. I'm the president of the GovCon Chamber of Commerce, and I want to welcome you to my federal sales training, where I provide tips for success in the federal market. Do me a quick favor, by the way, in the chat, just let me know if you're getting good AV on there. Since 2018, after I sold my last company and had been in government contracting for 20 years, I started the GovCon Chamber in order to teach small businesses like you and yours that government contracting is not a secret. It's just a process. When we follow a process A to Z, we have repeatable, predictable results. And that's what I want for you. If you haven't done this already, make sure you sign up for the newsletter. So the GovCon Government Contracting Success newsletter that we have, it's the place where I'm able to share a lot more information, because we put a lot of content out there that you would find valuable. But if you happen to miss it because I posted on LinkedIn or it's on YouTube or our website, really the newsletter is this digest, if you will. So you can go, oh, let me see what I might have missed this week. So make sure you sign up for the newsletter. And also, if you're attending the training and you registered, thank you. I really appreciate that. Thanks for the AV checks. If you've registered, I really appreciate that. That's good for us and what we try to do. If you're attending the training and you haven't registered, please consider doing so, right? If you go to the newsletter, you can see the training we're doing for the rest of the week. I already have the next 25 trainings all the way into early February lined up. Really, I'm ready to post them. I just didn't want to overwhelm people. But in the newsletter, you can find them so you can register. So just click register and attend. And the last thing is let others know. You find this valuable enough to come and spend your time with me and with the people in the community. So make sure you're letting your colleagues know, letting your teammates and friends know that we've got this training going on. Okay, let's get started by doing a quick overview of the 3 revenue paths that I teach people about. Really, these are the only 3 ways to make money. There is no other way to make money in the federal market. So the first path is subcontracting under small businesses. The second path is working directly with an agency and getting a prime contract, so priming with agencies. And the third path, and these are in order, is subcontracting under large businesses. When you look at the federal government, right? We're the sellers, you're the seller, and the government is the buyer. The government only buys from prime contractors. So if you're not a prime contractor, then you're a subcontractor, or you can be a subcontractor, right? Those are the only 2 ways to buy it. Doesn't matter how you finagle it. It doesn't matter if you call it joint ventures or mentor protege or any of these things. It still comes down to there's a prime and there's a sub. And the point of this is you can think of these 3 paths like, the federal revenue path cloud at the top. That's the golden pot of money or something, I don't know. And then down below, each one of these paths has a golden goose sitting on each one of these dark clouds. And the idea is, would you only go up to the golden goose on one of these clouds and collect eggs each morning? Or would you be looking at all 3 of them? And of course, you're going to sit there and say, I want to be looking at all 3. Put golden goose into the chat if you're going to look at all 3. Now, here's the caveat. You might not be ready to prime with agencies, and I'm going to talk about that. That's what I'm going to drive into today's training. You might not be ready to subcontract under larges. So begin with subbing under smalls. All of us should be looking at subbing with smalls. And then we go priming, and then we go to large, right? And the idea is if you're making, I would say, and I think I said this later on, but less than 3, 4, 5 million, just go all in on subbing under small, excuse me. When you do that, you're going to be able to make money. I'll show you today exactly how you can make money. I'll show you the process of what I talk about with my customers. So, and the last thing I'll just mention on this slide is that when you think about these 3 paths, when you're on a path, so say you start priming with an agency, then you should be priming with an agency and subbing with a small. When you finally get to subcontracting with larges and you've got a relationship that they bring you in, then you should be looking at all 3 paths. Your 2024, your 2025 strategic plan, where we're getting revenue, should cover down on all 3 of these paths. So golden goose into the chat if you're going to get money off of all 3 clouds at some point. Let's talk about path number 1. This is subcontracting under small businesses. The reason I like subcontracting under small businesses, among many reasons, for example, there's a huge pool of money, 23% of the federal dollars theoretically. That's a good reason, but it's the easiest path to federal revenue. And I put here a couple of the reasons, right? One of the reasons is because you can talk directly to the owner. I've got multiple business owners who are doing multiple millions of dollars here right now in the training in chat live, right? And so if you're building a community, if you're reaching out to people, right? Don't just spam people, but if you're developing relationships, I have a separate training for that, a lot of them. But if you're developing if you're developing relationships with the people who are in chat, who are small businesses, people who work there or small business owners, if you build those relationships and they're doing 5, 10 million, there might be room in there if you guys have got a match or complementary services, right? But you get right to the owner on a small business. You don't get that in a large businesses. There's multiple decision makers. There's really just one decision maker in a small. The second thing is small businesses, whether it's the owner or other people, they all remember what it's like. They remember how hard it is to get their top secret clearance. They remember how hard it was to get their first revenue, how hard it was to get into an agency. So they remember what it was like. For larges, they really don't, right? You'll have these exceptions, but the norm in the large is they're big, and the people who come in are coming into a machine that is $1 billion machine that has the name Booz Allen on their business card. They don't understand what it's like to walk in and people go, whatever, right? And so that's a very good advantage to working with smalls. They get you. They understand where you're at. When you start subcontracting under small businesses, you want to begin by having a clear focused offer, a niche. I was just looking at DOD put out this 10 steps to to getting started in government contracting. It's all crazy. But when I was looking at it, I said, the very first step is not registration. It's not this, it's that. It's knowing what you sell. You have to know what you sell, and you have to niche it down. Niching down just means if you do construction, come down to painting. If you do painting, come down to trimming or something, right? If you do cybersecurity, come down to risk management framework. When you do that, you niche down and you make it easy for those of us who want to help you to be able to help you. You make it easy for us to see where you fit. So when you're talking to a small business and say, hey, I'd like to potentially team up with you, and they do network engineering, but they don't really do cybersecurity, you can say, oh, we do cybersecurity audits or something. Oh my God, that's great. The customer's been asking me, I don't really do that. Or we got a contract and there's room. So when I look to a small business, here's what I recommend for you. And here's what I do with my customers, right? Don't look at businesses that are under 10 million. Absolutely develop relationships and network with people who are under 10 million, et cetera. But you want to look and find strategic relationships. I always talk about strategic relationships, people who are going to learn and grow with you, mutual success. And so you want to look at a strategic partner from your side that is big enough to be able to handle giving you 2 or 4 people every year on their contracts. So when you start coming below 10 million or 5 million, you might have some chances in there, but it's harder because you're kind of competing with you. It's not a lot of room, not a lot of revenue in there. But certainly when you're looking at 10 million and above, there's always room. Now it's just a matter of building the relationship. So generally look for 10 to $40 million firms. Firms that are bigger than 40 are on their way out. They're great, but they're not really smalls. I mean, they're certainly going to be great relationships. But when I say small business, I'm looking for that window between 10 and $40 million a year. I wanted to give you a couple examples with my customers and where this happens. And so I use it in different ways. The first example I wanted to use is $175 million. This is an IDIQ, but it's a single award IDIQ in the Air Force to one of my customers. That customer is a small business, and that's a large contract that they have. And it's 100% used, right? Even though I said it's an IDIQ, a contract vehicle, it's going to be 100% used. And so I know for a fact that they have room on that contract. They won it a couple of years ago. But if you had a relationship with them, which several of the people, other businesses I know where I made introductions, or this small business has made introductions at events, they said, sure, how can I help you? You seem to be a good company, a good person who's just starting a company, come on in. Let's see where there's a fit. But this is a small business that has $175 million. They were doing probably $15 million when they won this. So there's room in there. They obviously have a team built for that contract, but there's room, right? And when you start building relationships, it's not just about the size of that contract, but it's about the willingness of the owners to engage with you and say, yeah, sure, let's see where you can fit. Let's build a relationship. Let's see where we can work together on opportunities. The second example is $50 million in the VA. And this is another customer of mine that they did this on their own with kind of years of doing what I just said, is building a relationship. And but these guys just won a contract that is $50 million, right? It's huge. It doubled the size of their company. And they did it themselves as subcontracting. And that contract is big enough, right? It's in one place. It's big enough that if you had a relationship with those two owners, then you would be able to get in there, right? And by the way, don't ask me in the chat to introduce you. I'm not introducing you today to those people, especially if you and I aren't interacting a lot. But I'm saying these are just two. I could find 100 like them. And so this company that just won 50 million, they're moving forward. And the last example I want to use is another, it's an 8A company, a customer of ours. They went out and won a contract. It was 27 FTEs, full-time equivalent, 25 employees. And so clearly when they won the contract, it was a kind of a recompete thing. So there's some incumbent employees in there, but there's room. And as they go after other work and the recompete, now you're looking at a company that's able to do it. And the business owner in here, I've introduced like 5 people to her saying, hey, these people do something similar to you. Do you mind if I make an introduction? And she's always looking for good teaming partners. So she's open to it. And if there's a potential for you to pick up 2 people on her contract, remember that as I go to the next slide, right? And so you can find those business owners yourself. I talk about how to do that in other training, but I just want to sit there and wrap up this path 1 with an example of the math. If you'd like to grow $1.6 million, right? Grow in the next 12 months, how do you get to 1.6 million? It's not going to happen for magic, and it's not going to be happening guaranteed. What will happen though, that kind of result can happen when you do the right efforts. And I'm not here to promise you that. I'm here to tell you the steps, right? So what I want you to do is the math. I teach all the time that you want to build strategic relationships. If you were here yesterday, I said 24 relationships, 8 with agencies, 8 with larges, and 8 with smalls. That's about the most strategic relationships 1 or 2 people can handle for their company. And the idea is you're spreading it across those 3 revenue streams, right? And so the 8 strategic with smalls, if you had 8 strategic relationships with smalls, that means they're committed to mutual growth. That means that you're in there having a meeting every 2 weeks talking about the pipeline where you can fit. And so those 8 strategic relationships, if you could get 2 FTEs, right, 2 opportunities to get subcontracts with them. It's 1 subcontract with 2 people, or 2 subcontracts, 1 person each, or 10 subcontracts with a 5th, or whatever the math works, right? 8 strategic relationships, 2 opportunities. Imagine a low rate. $50 an hour is a very low rate in the IT space. But if that was a $50 an hour contract for these 2 people, that's $100,000 each, right? And so you need 10 people to reach $1 million. If you had 2 opportunities for each of the 8 strategic relationships, that's 16 people times $100,000 a year. That's $1.6 million in the next 12 months. And the thing about it is, it's not this rocket science. First off, you don't even have to look at future opportunities. If you find small businesses that are doing 10 to 40 million, they almost always have open positions. And if you build a strategic relationship, not going in and going, hey, how can I fill your slots? Right? You go in and you talk about the future, and you develop the relationship, and then you evolve to talking about current positions. But if you do that, the reality of you getting 1.6 million is a realistic reality, if that's the right way to say it, right? You have to call these folks. You just have to reach out. You have to call 100 people to begin to find those 8 people, those 8 companies that are willing to work with you and that are strategic relationships, meaning they have the opportunity for you to be able to grow. And what I put here was, do that. Call these small businesses if you want to make 1.6 million in the next 12 months, instead of what I call constructive procrastination, trying to build relationships with larges, trying to go after federal agency prime contracts when you've never won anything before, or you don't have 3 good past performances to win it. Go build your business under small business. And if you're already having success, don't forget that there's this whole pool of money that's out there that you can participate in by teaming up with smalls. Okay, so let's move on to path number 2, prime contracting with agencies. So obviously my favorite is small business subcontracting, because it gets you into the money, it gets you into the door with the least amount of work, but solidly into the federal market. But we all like prime contracting with agencies, right? It is a fantastic path to be on. There's no doubt about that. The potential for you to continue growing. Frankly, when I look at exit plans for people, what I say is, if you want to sell your company, if you're looking at an exit, you definitely need prime contracts and contract vehicles. That's what gives you the multiplier to be able to sell. If you're just trying to grow your company for long-term growth and to be here forever, then you want to make sure you're covering down on all 3 revenue streams pretty heavily. But one of the things about prime contracting with agencies, and I was trying to use this analogy when I was preparing the slides today, the idea of prime contracting with agencies, it's more like professional football with all the pads, et cetera, than it is flag football, which is what I call subcontracting under small businesses. When you subcontract with a small business, remember, the owners are friendly. That's flag football. Flag football is when you have a belt around your waist with flags, and if I grab it, it's the equivalent of tagging, right? Or tackling you if I pull the tag off you. Sometimes we play no contact flag football, which means literally you're not allowed to bump into the other people, and you can grab the flag and they're down. Professional football, contracting with an agency, that I need pads because somebody's trying to come in and take my head off. The difference between that and priming or subbing with larges is that at least when I'm down in professional football, contracting with an agency, I'm down. The play is over. But when you think about subcontracting in their large businesses with this overall analogy, it's like mixed martial arts. When I'm down, then they take advantage to just keep hammering on me, right? It's brutal. And that's the idea of these 3 paths. When you're getting into government contracting, when you're trying to grow your company from 5 to 10 million, make sure you're playing flag football most of the time, and then football that's got really good rules. before you ever get into the no holds bar world of subcontracting under larges, I want you to play all three sports. I want you to go through all three paths, but I want you to do them as you're ready. Some of the things about priming with agencies that you just have to keep in mind, and this is in particular for people who are newer to the world, there's just massive administrative burden with priming with an agency. You have to do all this extra stuff beyond the work. But when you subcontract with a small or large, you don't have to do any of that extra work. You just have to show up, do the job, and some basic reporting. But they've got the accountability to the government. And so when you subcontract, you take on all that responsibility, which is back office administrative activity. And then generally, like I said, you need 3 past performances. And this is why I say it's path 1, path 2, path 3. You get your past performance experience as a subcontractor within that small business world. And then when you come over to the federal agencies and you try to get a prime contract, they go, oh, you've already worked with our agency. You've been subcontracting. Now you're trying to go for a prime. Sounds good. Let's get you in here. So it's easier to win prime contracts when you have that experience and you're coming from small business subcontracting. And so the third path is subcontracting under large businesses. So for me, it's a fantastic place to be, right? It's a fantastic stream of money to be getting, revenue to be getting. Again, you just want to wait till you're ready to get to that stage, right? It's the ultimate, in my eyes, of revenue stream. And here's why. It's because I can get on these huge contracts. If I'm a small business, there's pretty much a limit on how big of a contract I can get. Maybe 175 million, 250 million, something. Maybe I'd stretch it a little more, but it's unusual, right? People have done bigger contracts, but it's unusual to get a big pool. But it's not unusual for $1 billion firm to win $1 billion contract. And so now you're looking at a bigger piece of the federal government pie. So that's one of the reasons I really like it. But you want to wait until you've done the first 2 paths. So an example here, I already mentioned this earlier, but a customer picked up that $50 million contract. That was a subcontract. And that was actually their second or third or fourth subcontract. It was just the biggest one that they got. And it came from them doing business themselves and then starting off with one person and then like 10 people. And then it moved up into this $50 million contract. And so it came from them constantly proving themselves to these larges that they work with. In this case, just one large, right? But you can go that direction. And remember how I said 8 strategic small business partners can lead to 1.6 million. Well, it's the same thing here. That customer who just picked up 50 million, it is not unrealistic for them to think they can pick up $400 million worth of contract value if they had 8 strategic large business partners, right? If they're in one agency with this partner and they're over here in the Army with another one and the Air Force with another one, if they kind of blend that up so there's no competition, they don't have to worry about competing with the largest, their large partners. If they do that, the ability for them to get to a stage where they're pulling in $50 million revenue from these strategic partners, that's not an unrealistic thing. That's planning out your strategy for how much money do you want as a company, like what revenue are you trying to get to, and how do you get there, right? This is the how do you get there. But you have to keep in mind that large businesses, when you look at this golden goose that is laying these revenue eggs, the large businesses, they have the toughest criteria. If you go to my LinkedIn profile, I think I still have this in my featured section as a panel interview with large primes where I talked with them and I really dug into, well, what's the criteria? How do we get in? Not just, what door do we knock on? But I was like, what do you care about? What stops us? And for example, one person was really digging into, if you're not financially stable, if you can't really show us good lines of credit in the multi-million-dollar level, then we don't want you, right? If we can't look at your finance, your books, your process, we don't see maturity, we don't want you, right? And so from a holistic standpoint, the larges are all like this. You might be able to come in from relationships or some other things, but for the most part, they're very strict because they're serving the government customer. They cannot afford any risk of getting a teaming partner that can't deliver. And so they just have this, I put down a couple, right, of criteria. They need you to niche down. They don't need you to come in and say, we can do anything. It's like, who cares? We can do anything. What can you really do? Well, if you can come in and say, hey, we can do AI in the HR, artificial intelligence in the human resource arena, they're like, wow, okay, let's talk about that. That's a niche. The second thing is they really want agency intimacy. This is different than agency knowledge. Agency knowledge is you're aware of the agency, you've read their documents. Agency intimacy means you've worked in the agency. You have strategic relationships within the industry. You can bring them to relationships they haven't had, right? One of the big advantages smalls have that larges don't is smalls can talk to all sorts of small business professionals within an agency that the larges can't get to. And so they are able to gather information. The larges would value that. Experience, having lots of past performance is really important to a large. And so, yes, you can get into these larges, and yes, it is a really good goal, but they do have tight criteria. And again, remember, you want to walk through those paths. So here's what I want you to remember coming out of today's training. First thing is, if you're under $1 million for sure, only subcontract with smalls. Stop for 2024 thinking about priming or working with largest. Just double down and go after that $1.6 million example. I have customers that are at $100 an average, so they don't need that many either relationships or that many opportunities. They just need, if they're at $100 an hour, they just need 8 strategic relationships in one position. That's doable. You just have to work to get it. The second thing to remember is once you're on all 3 of these paths, never get off. So you start on one path and you're on there in the path 1. And then you're subbing under smalls and you're starting to prime under agencies. Stay on both of them. Don't forget path 1. And when you finally get to larges, don't forget about path 2 or 1. Stay on all 3. Larges do that. They get money and they get contracts and they get access through all 3 of these revenue streams or paths. Last thing is, if you'd like, I have a handout for this. We're updating it for 2024, so give me a day or two. But if you'd like that, put it into the chat. 3-path handout. 3 paths. Well, whatever. You know what I'm saying. Put 3-path handout, please, in the chat. If you don't do the please part, well, I'll still send it to you, but I'm not going to like it. Let's just all be really nice and polite to each other. I put out a ton of training. The reason I do this is 99% of the people out there are not looking to, work with people like me at the level that I work with. But if you are and you want to invest in accelerating your growth, go to GovCon Chamber, check us out, learn about how we can help you. I'd love to help you if it makes sense for you and it makes sense for us. For all of us, remember, government contracting, it's not a secret. It's just a process. Part of the process is coming back. Go check out tomorrow's training and register for it. I'll see you in that next training.